Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Gary Fowler, and I am the CEO, president, and co-founder of GSD Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley. I'm a serial entrepreneur with multiple startups under the belt, including 2 unicorns, love AI and quantum computing, and blockchain. And it's with that, I have an incredible guest today, Aly Madhavji. Aly is a pilot, a Schwartzman scholar, a blockchain guru, has worked all over the world, including with PwC, Blockchain Founders Fund, the United Nations, INSAT, and his LinkedIn profile is 16 pages. I'd never seen anything like this, just packed full of incredible information. So he's a serial entrepreneur, an investor, loves blockchain, loves crypto, loves how the world's moving. So it's with that, I'd like to introduce Aly. Hi, Aly. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Gary.
Yeah, good to have you here. So I have a question for you. How in the world do you get a $100,000 scholarship to be a cadet pilot?
Yes, it's a good question. So it might be a little bit of a childhood dream, but growing up, always wanted to be a fighter pilot. So you can ask my parents, but at the age of 2, I would just walk around in a fighter suit, essentially a jet suit, not on Halloween, just on every other day, and so always grew up wanting to go down that road, and joined Air Cadets quite early, which is essentially a program run in part by the military in Canada, by the Air Force, and got a lot of exposure to that, and then ended up actually joining the Air Force when I was 17 years old, to actually go in and go out and get several pilot's licenses, and to go sort of full time with the Air Force for a big chunk of my career. I actually decided after about a year to leave the Air Force, specifically because at the time I wanted to, and still maybe would have wanted to, I think a little bit of a childhood dream, fly fighter jets. But Canada actually hasn't gotten new fighter jets. And so we have very limited training, given that our existing jets are from 1972 primarily, which are the CF-18s. And so that was a bit of the challenge behind that childhood dream, and maybe why I cut losses on it, and decided to pursue an entirely different career with what I'm doing now. Although I do have to say, investing in early stage startups, and you would know this, is just as thrilling, if not maybe more sometimes, than flying planes or flying jets. So it's a lot of risk, it's a lot of excitement, and so can't complain about the path that this has led me to.
Yeah, but those G-forces, that'll get you every time.
Yeah.
I remember, I saw the new trailer for Maverick, the Top Gun movie.
Yeah.
And I remember, Talk to Me Goose, Turn and Burn. And I just loved that. It was just so cool. And the music so that must have been a great experience. What pilot licenses do you have?
No, so that's where so I was training on originally on Cessna 172s, which are single engine planes, and then I was meant to go out and get my commercial pilot's license. And so I actually ended up, when I left the Air Force, ended up not completing all of that. At some point, I do plan to go back and complete at least the single engine sort of license. But going out and getting the entire suite of dual and quad engine, and then going to jets, just sort of wasn't in the cards for me at that point.
But you're thinking about it. I can see it in your eyes.
100%.
We used to have a 337 Skyhawk. So I was working on a project, and we had 2 337 Skyhawks. And I remember actually flying into Toronto. And we were coming up to Toronto, the defroster and the windshield came off. So the wire came loose. And you remember the 337, the push-pull, engine in the front and engine in the back. and it started flopping. The bracket broke on the, and I'll never forget the pilot saying to me, "Do you have a driver's license?" I said, "Yes." And we're flying over the lake. He said, "Put it in your sock." And I'm like, why would he say this is not good? I remember that. And I was thinking to myself, we ended up landing in Buffalo, New York, and everything was fine. But it was a lot of fun. It's an incredible experience and freedom. You know, when you're up in the sky, it's just amazing. So,
Oh, it's something everyone's got to experience. It's a totally different world.
and do you still fly today?
I do not. So it's been actually a long time since I've gone on my last flight, but at some point I'm hoping to carve out some time and go and, get the licenses again and then start up again.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about Tsinghua University and why did you went to a Master's of Global Affairs? Where is that? Is that in China? And why did you do it?
Yeah, so Tsinghua University is generally considered one of the leading institutions in the world, and sort of one of the leading or the leading institution out of China. And for me, it was a really exciting experience because I don't see a world where there continues to be growing business ties, growing influence across Asia and with China. I see the growth and sort of in Chinese capital abroad, and you see that pretty much ever around the world. And I think that trend continues to accelerate. And so that was a big part in me going to China, getting exposure to China. And one of the big objectives that I had was to start actually doing business deals in China. And so that for me was sort of the way to get my foot in the door as part of that. And it helped tremendously. In the same year while I was there, we already started doing very large deals in China. We've already got numerous portfolio companies in China. We've had a lot of companies look and launch sort of products within China. And a lot of those relationships that I built from that helped to fuel it. Now, the program that I did as well at Tsinghua University was a program called Schwarzman Scholars. And so that's funded by, in part, Steve Schwarzman, who many may know from, leading Blackstone and creating one of the most successful funds there. But the opportunity, the exposure to global leaders as part of that program as well was fascinating, right? So, to get a lot of time with, business leaders, political leaders, I think every week or every other week there was, either a president or prime minister coming to share insights with, our class. There was, some of the Fortune 500 executives there, quite often, and that type of insights was phenomenal. And just being able to have a meal and sharing a meal with people like that was just such a fascinating experience to help my personal development as well quite a bit.
No, that's great. I lived in Russia for 14 years, spent a lot of time there, and I went. I was a professor at the Skolkovo, and also took a number of courses at Moscow State University. I went through that myself, and I remember Bob Dole came over many years ago, and I had lunch with Bob Dole and Condoleezza Rice dinner, and it was incredible. Behind closed doors, listen to the real deal.
Absolutely,
what you see in the front, right? It's not the same.
It's completely different. But it's fascinating when they don't need, individuals of that stature, right, have to be very careful about what they say. There's a lot of people, trying to nitpick at every little thing that they're saying. And so they have to be so careful. But when you're just sharing a meal as friends, it's a very different experience. And you get to actually really dig into and learn from their insights, in that context.
Now, what did you learn from, and which person, if you can say, what did you say? Which is, this is unbelievable. I heard something was incredible.
I mean, there's some different ones. I mean, like Christine Lagarde, who chairs or heads up sort of the European Central Bank now, had some incredible insight. I was actually very, very impressed with her. I think another one, I had dinner with Michael Dell, and I thought that was incredibly interesting, right? I mean, the career that he's had, how he's gone back and sort of repurchased Dell. I know with Silver Lake and others, but just hearing through that experience, how he started off at such a young age, the challenges that he went through along that journey, and how that shaped what he's doing. But when he started talking about it one-on-one, or in sort of a very small setting, it's very different, right? And I talked to him as well about what we were doing, and he found that quite fascinating. We talked a lot about crypto and Bitcoin, and Dell was actually one of the very early players accepting Bitcoin for purchases, and so a lot of very interesting conversations there.
Well, I love that stuff. That's really cool. Okay, so fast forward. Why did you go to PwC?
Yeah, so PwC for me, so that I actually went to PwC before Tsinghua University, which was my master's. But PwC for me was just an incredible training ground to really build a really sound foundation around how to look at companies across different industries. I started off in the assurance practice, got my CA, so my chartered accountant license or designation, as well as several other accounting designations. And then with PwC, actually moved into corporate turnarounds. And that was helping companies that were about to go bankrupt return to profitability. And that was just fascinating. And that's not something PwC typically specializes in, but just working with some of the biggest titans in private equity globally, and sort of being able to see the deals that they're working on, even directly getting exposure and working with some of those people. And I have to say, one of the most stressful jobs of my life, when you're dealing with a company that's got 4 months of cash, for example, and part of the job is to make sure they don't run out, otherwise everything's lost, and everyone sort of loses their job. And so it's really about how do you save as much as possible, salvage this, turn this around, and get it back onto a strong footing. But it's just so fascinating as an experience to do that. And so for me, it was actually very instrumental as well in how I also look at companies, how we're very focused on, going back to core growth. Like, we usually are looking at companies with, one core growth area. How do you actually scale that? How do you focus on that? You start seeing entrepreneurs that are trying to do 4 or 5 different revenue line items, really early. And we're just like, hey, no, let's focus on one thing. Let's do it right. And then we can go expand. And so that's helped shape a lot of the way that I look at companies and how to scale them as well.
No, that's great. Okay, so how in the world do you balance all these advisory opportunities? You had Time Pop. I know you're not there anymore. Polymath. How do you juggle it? Juggle them. I mean, it's one thing to have a full-time gig. It's another thing when you have 15 advisory roles or whatever. It seems like you've got quite a few. And then at the same time, you've been a columnist for CIT Networks.
Yeah, so we actually write in several different journals, including Cointelegraph and CIT Knowledge. We publish those quite often as well. And a big part of that is really just sharing insights that we talk about, we see about every day, right? And where we see the world going, and that future world that we also want to help create as part of what we do, right? So I think that's in reality not too difficult of one, right? In terms of the advisory roles, to be honest, it's not so bad. I mean, I get the question a fair bit, but I speak to, for example, every single one of our portfolio companies in our venture program every week, and a big part of what we do is getting hands-on, helping them actually solve a lot of the challenges. And it's something that I enjoy doing. I love doing. I mean, sure, we work long hours, but I only do it because I love it, and that's what drives us to do what we do. I'm sure that's a big part in driving you to be able to do what you do and the successes that you've had. And I think that's a really important component. But We do try to make sure meetings are focused. I organize my schedule in 20-minute blocks typically, just to make it more efficient, and to make sure that, if it isn't enough time, that we've got clear agendas, and we can always schedule follow-up, so that's never an issue. But we want to make sure that we can keep meetings, as efficient as possible. And to be honest, in a digital world, that helps a lot more as well, where you don't have to deal with, traveling to New York, or you don't have to travel to London, for a meeting that's going to be 2 hours long, right? Now you can do all of this remote, and that actually makes things a lot easier as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you wrote this book, Your Guide to Get into Medical School. You didn't go to medical school. You went to business school, and you went to school in China. How did you write that? I mean, what did you say? Oh, I'm going to take the MCAT exams, and this is what you need to do, or what made you decide to write that book? I know you've written several others.
Yeah, so there's 3 books, right? And they're all self-help books, to help, young professionals or young people solve what I think are some of the sort of most critical years in their life, right? And so, the first book was Your Guide to Succeed in University, was a hit, had a lot of really good feedback, won international book awards, etc. And then we came out and wrote Your Guide to Get into Medical School. And I wrote that actually with 4 medical doctors who are extremely well qualified on this topic. And so they actually covered a lot of the more specific medical related knowledge. And where I sort of came in was covering a lot of stuff around like leadership, networking, how to build a lot of the right relationships that you're going to need. And then leverage certain things around like study habits and other things that were part of that on how you can do some of these things more effectively. And that book did really, really well as well. I know there's a lot of, students that still reach out to me right now. And it's been a long time since we wrote it, but a lot of students still reach out on this and how it's helped them and been instrumental sort of in their journey. And those are the types of messages that I think make a big difference. And then we went and wrote Your Guide to Succeed After Graduation. And that's focused on, young professionals, sort of the 10 years after you're done university, and helping, to jumpstart your career, in the working world.
No, that's great. And so what's one lesson? So if you say there's a trick to medical school, what is it? What's the one thing? How to get in? So one thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there's never sort of one secret, rule. You do one thing and you can get in, right? But I do think that networking is a bigger component than people think. I think it's one that's usually overlooked in almost anything that people do. But being able in any application to start putting a face to the name and sort of create real personality, which you can also get across in an essay and some of the written work, but it's a lot harder. But starting to get that across, I think, is very important. And a lot of processes, do try to avoid that. But you have to realize it's a basic human concept to try to do this, right? And so being able to get in front of people, talk to them, genuinely, show interest, show passion, have them know your story will help you differentiate regardless of the processes that they have in place. And that's just a natural aspect that I think can help anyone differentiate if they do that well.
No, I agree. I got to tell you, a friend of mine wanted to get into pharmacy school, and she said, well, they rejected her, and she had gotten the right kind of was a PCAT test, so she had the right stuff, but they rejected her. And I thought, this is kind of kooky. So I called the dean of the school personally. I said, I got a question. I did whatever his name, Dr. Armstead or whatever. And I said, Dr. Armstead, this is Gary Fowler, and I just wanted to give you a call. And he said, oh, hi, Gary. And I said, nice to meet you. I've read a lot of things about you, and I cited one of his articles. And I said, I got a question for you. A very, very dear friend of mine wants to go to pharmacy school, and she got a rejection, and she had really good PCAT tests. Is there anything to do? I mean, I don't know what the secret sauce is. He said, well, where did she want to go to school? And I said, at this particular location in Florida. What do you suggest? He said, well, we have another opening. We have another pod open where we're doing this doctorate work for the pharmacy degree, and we don't have enough students there. And I said, well, she'll go there. He said, okay, she's accepted then. It was crazy. I've never seen anything like. I personally called. I was on the phone, and that was a difference between binary success or failure, because you would have thought you didn't have the right stuff, but in reality, it was just they had too many qualified folks at one place, and she was a little late, and the other one had openings.
No, I agree. I think there's big challenges around this, right? When you see sort of a lot of and it's a bit of a tangent, but you've of course seen sort of this, college scandal in the US, a lot of the entitlement, but I think this is quite different, right? Like this is, how do you actually just build relationships, humanize the process still? And, if you as the individual are doing it, and you're doing it, with good intentions and looking at sort of how do you, have people know your story, I think that's something that you ought to be doing, especially as the world moves more digital. How do you sort of get out of all of this digital footprint and have someone actually know you and connect on a human level? I think that's a very important aspect, in this context, and just as a life rule, right, going forward.
Well, one of the things that I talk about a lot now is you need to write, you need to have a presence online, because as soon as you talk to somebody or connect with somebody on Zoom or want to set up a meeting, they're going to Google your name. They're going to see who you are. They're going to look for articles you've written or videos that you've been in or events where you've spoken. They're just going to check, or books you've written. They just look every time. I mean, it's so, they say, well, I don't know what to do. I'm located in Calgary, Canada, and there's nobody around here to fund us. What do you suggest? The thing is, you got to have a presence. You got to be looked at as an expert. You got to become that expert.
We actually tell our startups it's easier now than ever before, in my opinion, right? I mean, now you can be in, Calgary, Alberta, and you can be presenting at an event as a thought leader in the Middle East or in the US, and you don't need to travel, and you can do it in Latin America the same day, right? And so, really getting out there. I mean, you've got to obviously have the pedigree, right? And you've got to build that pedigree, but then it's just about getting it out there and being able to build up your sort of brand as a thought leader then, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And you gotta practice. I was on a pitching competition today, and a guy is really nice guy and really great background, but man, oh man, he had so many slides, and real good guy, but he needed to skinny it back, and I told him, have you ever heard of Guy Kawasaki's rules? And so he said, yeah, let me check it out. So part of it is you got to practice. The other thing is you got to make it entertaining. I mean, part of what we do is now you have to be an entertainer. People don't want to sit around and hear a monotone voice. You want to hear you with passion and moving forward and excitement. And they don't want to hear about the negative shit stuff. They want to hear about the positive.
Exactly. But actually, we've got some really good stories on this. But, we tell our startups that, less is more in this context, right? So when you're going up on a pitch, I mean, the more you share, because like you think it's important, may not actually be important to the audience or the judges, right? And the investors. And so, in that scenario, you're actually just putting up more reasons for someone to say no, whereas your objective is not normally to get someone to invest from one of these competitions or one of these events. It's actually just to get meetings, right? Your objective is you want to get as many meetings as possible, so then you can actually tell them everything else that you want to tell them, and everything else they want to hear as part of that. And so this is where we also see a lot of disconnects with startups. We've seen some really funny and entertaining pitches over the years, but like I remember we were at one in Singapore that we were judging, and someone was up there literally reading on stage their pitch, and my partner actually interrupted him on stage and said, well, why are you reading? And he's like, well, I don't want to make a mistake while I'm up here. And he's partly reading, partly sort of knew it. And my partner was like, well, look, you've already made a mistake, because you're supposed to be doing this every single day, 24 hours a day, living and breathing this business, and you don't even know what you do, that you need to read off of cue cards. You should just get off stage. And I think that was very fitting in reality, because, as a founder, you do need to live and breathe this business. You need to know what you do. Your job is to give confidence to investors, to customers that you can deliver, et cetera. And those sorts of actions are signaling, the exact wrong thing to all different stakeholders, right?
Well, that's why you got to practice, right? You got to go down and practice. There's a book a friend of mine recently wrote called Getting to Wow. Bill Record, Guy Kawasaki's partner, good friend of mine. And, you got to enchant. This guy says you got to enchant people. You got to make them excited. You got to make them want to know more. You got to show them the credibility of who you are and what you have. You got to show them the strength of your team. You got to show them your history and the success. We talk about multi-generational, culturally diverse, decentralized teams, 3 components. And it's really important today because if you're a startup in Toronto or Calgary or Florida or wherever, the thing is, how in the world do you have those contacts? As you said, in the books, a lot of it's about the network. But if you haven't been to Silicon Valley and you don't know a lot of people and haven't lived there for a long time or have credibility, how in the world are you going to get funded? The probability of getting funded cold is weak. You got to have contacts. So look at it. Mark Zuckerberg was at Harvard and connected with some of the most powerful people in the world, and then moved out to Silicon Valley during that summer. And you look at it, a lot of it's just about the power of the network that you have, and they just don't realize it. The other thing is, I remember at Stanford, I took a course. I didn't take a lot of courses. I was a poor country boy, right? I took some continuing ed course, but one of them was on presenting, and it was they had an acting coach and also a business professor, and so we're going down through this presentation skills course, and I thought this is going to be really fun. This is not going to be hard at all. Man, this was really hard because you would come into class and they would say, okay, today there's just been a problem. There was a lawsuit filed. You're in front of the media. You've got 20 minutes to establish your position. And here's what's happening with the company. And I'm going like, oh my God, I thought this is going to be fun. This is like, you got an acting coach judging you from nonverbal skills and your voice. And on the side, you got a business professor talking about the content. And it was, anyhow, but you got really good. And then,
we actually did something very similar at INSEAD, and it was a multi-day, I think it was almost like a week sort of course where it was just super intense, and all of these problems go wrong in this business that you're running.
Yeah.
And then you've got media there, and you've got investor pitches there, and all of this stuff just built it. Very fascinating experience, and I'm pretty sure I was up at least 20 hours a day on that. So it was not a walk in the park for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So startups out there, make sure connections are important. Make sure you have your presentation skills.
I think a big part of this, though, that I strongly believe is that you can do it from anywhere in the world. I don't think you need to be in Silicon Valley, but you're right that network's very key. And so it's, if you're in, let's say, Lagos, Nigeria, right? How do you now, from that scenario, put the right people around you to help you actually go out and make this thing a success, right? So you can still supplement it with finding, the right advisors, the right, cheerleaders for you, making sure you're keeping the right people up to date on your progress. And then that can help open up a lot of doors. And there's a lot of processes that you can, put in place to help you with that. But, you can do it from anywhere, but there is definitely, in many cases, an advantage to being, say, in Silicon Valley or in New York. Or like
Valley, I'm walking down the street, right, on a Saturday. I ride my bike to Starbucks, 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday, across from the Equinox gym. Tim Cook comes in 6:30, 7 o'clock, whenever they open up. And I generally ride my bike going up to Stanford. He's there. Yeah. What's the chance I'm going to talk to Tim Cook or, have a chance to spend even 5 or 10 minutes with somebody like him? It's unbelievable. Or Mark Zuckerberg at the Chinese restaurant, or Larry Page's brother. Just, I am many, many, many people. And, you're right about business is truly a contact sport. So one of the things I don't say you have to be there, but having those relationships, so multi-generational folks that are part of your team are really important because they do have those trusted connections. Because when you look at it, it's all said and done. It's about trust. Can you really deliver what you promised me you delivered? Have you delivered it before? And do I trust you? And it's hard to do that online Not saying it's impossible, because it's hard, but possible. But at the same time, you need to have those connections. You need some people with the gray hair. You need people that have gone down through and lived it, and you need cultural diversity too. It doesn't matter, as you said, and whether you're from Lagos or from Canada or from Florida or California or Boston or London, doesn't matter, or Moscow. It only matters if you can get the results. And so, as you said, that's really important. All right, listen, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I appreciate your time. So, in summary, so in terms of blockchain, in terms of what's happened in the world, can you tell our audience, what's your forecast for the next year, of what's going to happen in terms of blockchain and crypto, and then some closing thoughts, and also where can people reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we don't really make short-term predictions on, say, like cryptocurrency markets, but, from a blockchain perspective, from a technology perspective, we see this as completely transforming the world, right? And there's a few different aspects here, right? So you see, blockchains solving multi-party trust issues, and you're continuing to see enterprise adoption on this, as well as significant adoption and sort of let's call it private block or public blockchains, right? We're very bullish on privacy. We think the world is sort of moving in a path where we're going to see even more stuff on privacy. You can think about things like private internets. You can think about private currencies to be able to move, and this will become bigger and bigger topics, I think, over the next 5 years than it has been over the last 5 years. We look at, you've probably heard non-fungible tokens in the news. We think everyone's overcomplicating it. We look at this very simply. We say, this is the way to track ownership in a digital world. And so if you think about this in a physical world, if you couldn't track land ownership, if you couldn't track title, asset ownership, any of this type of ownership, you would say that, hey, this is barbaric. This is, there's a lack of infrastructure. And in 20 years, people are going to be saying the exact same thing about us. The fact that we didn't think that we needed to track digital ownership. And so we actually think that this is going to create trillion-dollar markets in digital ownership. Mm-hmm. And then you've got decentralized finance. And this is going to be, huge. We're talking already about tens of billions of dollars moving through these systems right now on a daily basis. But this is going to help to actually leapfrog and solve a lot of the challenges around banked and unbanked and underbanked populations in the developing world. And so we think there's going to be a major leapfrogging of banking infrastructure in the developing world from this technology. Now, it's still early. A lot of the use cases right now aren't actually solving that problem, but you're starting to see a very democratized set of borrowing, lendings, and savings products globally through this. So these are some of the bigger topics, and we don't have a ton of time to dive into those, but these are some of the bigger topics that we're aware of and we're following, and we're putting our money and our time, into solving and backing these sorts of solutions to these, major problems that sort of underlie those. And so in terms of reaching out, I mean, if you are a startup, we'd love to hear from you. We actually respond to every startup that reaches out to us. So you can contact us through our website, which is blockchainff.com. Find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Send me a note. I'm happy to respond and see if there's ways that we can help you as a fund. And in a lot of cases, even if we're not the right fit, we'll connect you to other people, right? I mean, we're always happy to do that. We know it's tough being out there as an entrepreneur. I've done it myself, and so. And Gary, I know you've got a ton of experience with this. So, we're always happy to help where we can. So definitely reach out, and happy to always chat. And
which way's the best way, Aly? Is it LinkedIn, Twitter, email? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's a good one. Always happy to respond there. Twitter is also good, and through our website. I mean, we review every single submission on our website, and we get a lot of them every single day. But our team responds to all of them. I see all of them as well. So definitely feel free to reach out on those different channels.
No, that's great. Aly, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show today. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. It's a pleasure. And thanks for sharing some of your interesting experience from piloting all the way through blockchain and going to study in China. It's just fascinating. So, our audience, we'll be back again Thursday with another edition of GST Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm the host of the show. Great to have you here. I want you to stay safe, stay happy, and most importantly, believe in your dreams because they come true. Thanks again. Thanks, Aly, and see everybody later. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary. And next time we'll have to hear all about your stories. So thanks again.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.